you doing, y'all? Thanks. So I'm Steve Nevitt, Louisiana Native Seed Company. Like she said, I do mostly herbaceous prairie habitat restoration and any kind of basically herbaceous centered habitat restoration. Like a few of the presenters mentioned before, herbaceous habitat is one of the more difficult things to restore and preserve, and that's why it's important to do what we can to learn more about restoring it. This is the Cajun Prairie Restoration Site. This is what the prairie looked like the first time I ever saw the prairie. Mr. Jim Foray took a plant science class out to the Eunice Prairie Restoration Site in early May when the Baptisia sphaerocarpa was in full bloom. Another shot just to see more of the beauty of it. So I'll get right into prairie restoration. That's what I'm going to talk about first, a little bit of the details, some of the things that I learned, and a little bit of the specifics, just to help you all give a little bit of pointers from my experience. Generally, it depends on the soil and where you're at, what you're going to do to restore a prairie, excuse me, or preserve what you have there. There's so many factors that it's difficult to just give a broadcast one way to do it all, one way to do it every place. Generally, I'm going to talk about restoring and preparing the soil. Refers to more of South Louisiana, where rich alluvial soils. The prairies in South Louisiana, I think, are more fire dependent, adapted ecosystems. We have a lot of rain and rich soil, so we have a lot of tall, weedy plants growing very fast that compete with prairie plants. So unfortunately, we don't really have anything left. So when I tell people to get rid of it, spray everything that's there and prepare a clean seed bed, it's with not without any prior thought. There's a lot of areas, and we've been looking at a lot of places in the Cajun prairie, but just in these tall grass prairie ecosystems, there's seeds don't last more than 5 to 10 years. Their strategy is in long-lived plants. And so there's, contrary to popular belief, a lot of these perennial seeds don't last very long in the soil. So you get a chicken tree forest for 5 to 10 years, that ecosystem is lost forever. That's why it's really important to preserve all these remnants and everything. I'm gonna talk a lot about restoration, and I think one of the things we can learn through restoration is just how special that our remnants and preserved habitats are, and why it's more important to save those places as well as restore places. Like I was saying, site use and management history, generally in Acadiana, south of that line, if you can imagine, Acadiana and South Louisiana, south of I-10, a lot of rich alluvial soils that have been heavily farmed, plowed thousands of times in their lifetimes. So when I say plowing the soil, prepare, nuke everything that's there, I do that with the understanding that it's been done probably thousands of times before, and it's decades of history of farming. If you live in North Louisiana, or an area with prairies that may be edaphic driven based on poor soil or soil conditions, you don't necessarily want to go in and kill everything. You want to observe what's there and get an expert in to give you advice on what to do. So when I say like nuke everything, kill everything, don't get mad at me. I'm not saying that for everywhere, of course. Preparation and starting herbaceous habitats is the most important thing. I'm going to say that like a million times. Getting rid of all the weeds that are there. We live in a subtropical climate. Our farming practices produce millions and millions of weed seeds every year. If you live in South Louisiana, your prairie restoration is going to encounter weed seed invasion through flooding and wind and everything. So basically just coming up with a specific plan a specific and detailed, organized plan to herbicide your site that you choose repeatedly in the year before you decide to plant it. And you don't want to just spray and forget about it. You want to create a schedule for yourself and maintain that schedule. If you start early in the spring and spray and don't come back and continue that schedule, you may just create more weeds for yourself because you killed what was there and created an open area for more stuff to continue to grow. So you need to continue that prep work until the fall, repeatedly diminishing the weed seed load in the soil. I know these are things y'all all know and have heard me talk about before, but doing all these things specifically and paying attention to them will give you the most success. These are some pictures of what South Louisiana used to look like. The big takeaway from these images is that there's no trees in the background of any of them. This was prairie land, and there were no trees in between Lake Charles and Lafayette and Ville Platte except for the small gallery forests. So another slide to repeat on the importance of reducing the weed seed load in the soil. And by repeatedly tilling, repeatedly spraying, you are erasing the canvas, providing a blank canvas for the weed seeds that are already in the soil, already present, to come back up again, so then you can then kill them again and repeat that process as many times as possible into the fall to reduce that weed seed load in the soil, whether that's by oculation, by tarping, by herbicide, or by tilling. You need to do that. If you can get away with doing less soil damage, the better, especially in areas that haven't seen repeated farming for decades. It's more important to preserve that soil structure. But if you're in an area in South Louisiana around Lafayette where we've tilled our soils for decades and decades, it's not as important to be concerned with that soil structure. You will destroy that soil structure. There wasn't a whole lot to start with, but you're really just providing this blank slate for that to begin long-term process of soil rebuilding to start again. And you really got to give these native plants every chance that they can get started, because they're long-lived perennials, take 3 to 5 years to mature. Here's a site, first year site. What generally first year sites don't look like anything special. There's a lot of ruderal species, invasives and ruderals that come up in between and with your weedy species, even if you do an enormous amount of site prep in South Louisiana. We just have this huge weed seed load. And so you just kind of want to identify those really bad species. We're gonna have competition. Ruderal species is a natural part of succession. So it's not a bad thing, and it's in fact a good thing that you have these weedy species. It's not necessarily great that some of them can become invasive and take over and compete with your natives, but these weedy species are growing for a reason. They're growing because the soil structure is destroyed. They're growing because excess nutrients of the wrong kinds have been released. There's too much nitrogen in the soil. The ecosystem is out of balance. And these ruderal species grow quickly and take advantage of those situations, and eventually over time, the growing and dying and their cycles of life return the soil to a balance. So you're gonna have weedy species the first year, no matter what you do. And so through my years of experience trying different herbicides, a lot of people don't like to use herbicides. I don't necessarily love to use herbicides, but they provide an excellent tool for resetting decades of mismanagement that we have done. Just to take your yard that was an ag field for 100 years and turn into a suburban neighborhood, and then just say you want to let it go back to nature is just poor land management. It's not, you haven't done the things to set the cycle for nature to continue its restoration. So if you use the right mixture of herbicides, you can reduce the amount, read the labels very carefully, study them, and learn the percentages that you can use. If you use a mixtures of herbicides like triclopyr and Roundup and Panoramic, you can reduce the amount of glyphosate you use. You can, when you combine these with a grass selective and a broadleaf selective, you can reduce the Roundup to as much as 0.3% and still have an effective use of it. So you can really, basically, more exposure isn't better, but using proper PPE and proper mixing procedures, you will experience the same or less amount of carcinogen effect that you have then driving between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, right? There's all these carcinogens pumped out of these plants into the air that you breathe in driving around every day. And to refuse their use for good to start these restorations is not necessarily the smartest or most balanced things. You know, we live in this world where we've changed our management of everything. Like Dr. Creech was saying, we might need to think about different ways to use what we have to bring natives into the future.
Are those things that you mix together in one application, or do you normally just do one at a time?
Yeah, so to be most effective, you want to identify the weeds you have on your site and then identify what herbicides are most effective for those weeds. Generally, when you're doing prairie, Johnson grass, Vasey grass, Cajun grass are your main invasives that you want to worry about. All these other weedy species that you may know, Bermuda, Bahia, I don't really necessarily see as weeds. They disappear under competition from natives over time. But Johnson grass, Cajun grass, Vasey grass need specific attention before and after. And this mixture kind of caters to that to prevent it. Panoramic are plateaus and herbicide that is specifically Vasey grass, effective against Vasey grass and prevents Vasey grass germination. So mixing Roundup, triclopyr, and Fusillade are another grass selective. So Roundup, a broadleaf selective, which is triclopyr, and then a grass leaf selective, which is Fusillade, or there's other outrider, specifically good for Johnson grass. You can put the absolute bare minimum of herbicide on your property if it's the right kind and have an effective kill. Yeah, so those Panoramic, Fusillade, Outrider, and Triclopyr are the main ones that I use. If you do decide to use this, you can either hire a professional or, you know, wear proper PPE and do it in a safe way. Example of proper PPE, this is a little overkill, but we want to be safer than sorry. You don't necessarily have to wear a respirator mask, but especially when mixing, when you're exposing and opening these concentrations, it might be a good idea to wear it at least while you're mixing, but if not the whole time. I was talking about tilling and plowing a lot. I get a little till happy and plow happy because I do a lot of restorations in areas that used to be ag fields that have been plowed over and over again that don't have a good soil structure to begin with. So I'm not really losing anything, but if you live in an area outside of Acadiana, north of Acadiana, on the North Shore, some of these other areas, you do want to take special concern to soil disturbance, and disturbing the soil too much could provide more problems. So you want to lean towards maybe even just spraying or just tarping and not doing any soil disturbance to prepare that seed bed. And when you do come down to putting the seeds on the soil to get good seed to soil contact, using a light harrow or rake or fence harrow to just lightly scratch the very surface of the soil to allow those seeds to get seed to soil contact. Because disturbing the soil destroys your soil structure, and it also releases weed seeds from the seed bank. So if you do any kind of soil disturbance, tilling or harrowing, you want to make sure to accomplish that in the early summertime to release the weeds that you would do that if you had waited till right before seeding. So you want to do that process twice. You don't want to just do that once right before you seed, because then you might just release all those weed seeds in the soil that are then going to compete with your native seeds. So I would recommend doing that in early summer, because by late summer you don't get any rain, the process isn't effective, you don't get rains to germinate those seedlings. So you want to do that by early summer. This is what it looks like when I'm disking and tilling the soil. Just like I was saying, so this is after herbiciding and allowing the plant to die for several weeks. So you can't just go in and till a field with 3-foot tall grass in it. If y'all aren't experienced in ag or farming, there's processes. You got to get rid of the grass, you got to scrape it, run the disc, and then run a tiller. Some soils are too hard just to run a disc. You have to run a spike in it, rip it first. So it's a process, but just don't be discouraged when you go try to do something and it doesn't just work as simply as you think. You know, go back, look at it. If tilling or disking didn't work, you had too much grass and you didn't get the soil action that you were looking for, you know, go back and you might have to do a prep burn to get rid of all that dead duff to get to the bare soil to start preparing the soil. Like I was saying, the seed to soil contact is very important. These tiny seeds are minuscule, some of them the size of dust, and if they're not completely in contact with the soil, they won't have that consistent moisture. If you imagine they're like sitting on top of a blade of grass or sitting on top of a leaf, like a millimeter away from the soil even is too far. They're gonna have less of a chance to stay consistently wet for those first 48, 72, 100 hours where they need to send down those roots and get established. So seed to soil contact is really important. Getting that bare soil, that fluffy layer at the top, and then either walking on it or rolling it over with a cultipacker to press those seeds into the soil so they're stuck to the soil. If they're just sitting on top, they get blown away, pushed away in the rain, and then the first time it rains, they'll get wet and germinate, but then they'll be too far away from the soil. Even if they're a centimeter away from the soil, a few millimeters, they really need to be pressed to that soil surface. And then you can cover with straw or pine straw or jute mat to prevent erosion, especially if you're on a slope, but you do not want to create a consistent mulch layer. Many of these seeds need light and are very small when they germinate. So you basically kind of just want to create a matrix of mulch on the surface to prevent if any of the seeds move around in the rain so they don't move too far. But you still want to be able to see like 8 to 10 inch holes of bare ground through your mulch. This is in Lake Charles at the Episcopal Day School. One of our plantings, Phillips 66 sponsored this one. Throwing out the seed, getting plugs in the ground, students planting plugs. Just a basic process. You can see the site was herbicided several times and then disked 3 times before planting this, so we got nice bare ground. You're gonna wanna choose the right species for your site. Obviously, like I was saying, every site's different, so I'm sure y'all learned a lot from all the different presentations today about what grows where. Like I was saying, you don't necessarily just wanna treat every site the same, till every site. You wanna look at the history of the site, see what was there. If the site wasn't farmed continuously, you know, spend a year observing your site, letting things grow out and see what's there. And it all depends on what goals you have too. This is a Lacassine National Wildlife Refuge, same situation. Basic herbicided the site and disked the soil to create this bare seed. So these are all sites that we weren't really concerned, not that we weren't concerned with soil structure, is that we have so many large weeds in these thick, rich soils that you almost have to get a disc in there to start breaking that up to get these things to start decomposing so you can get to bare soil by the fall. Like y'all know, most native plants we plant in the fall so that native seeds can get their cold stratification. A lot of stuff is still flowering and setting seed till November, December here. So planting in December, you know, you can still do that. January, but you know, if you have a small site in your yard or somewhere on your property that you can irrigate, that's not a lot. You know, a lot of times we talk about native plants and not needing care, but you're recreating a perennial ecosystem that evolved over thousands of years, and you're trying to, you know, kind of recreate a thousands-year-old ecosystem. You can't just throw stuff out there and just hope for the best. Even when we do everything that I have from years of experience, everything that I can to try to make it successful. These things aren't going to be, they're not going to be like the remnants and preserves that we have. They're going to be a semblance of them. So we really need to do everything you can to give that a chance. You need to be this restorations gardener, and it really helps to irrigate in the first 1 to 2 months of a herbaceous planting. And I'm talking about prairie herbaceous plantings. These herbaceous planting concepts can be applied to any ecosystem with herbaceous plants. Not any ecosystem, obviously wetlands can be much different, but there are herbaceous plants in woodlands, there are herbaceous plants in pine savannas, there are herbaceous plants everywhere. So it's not just prairie. Like I was saying, you don't really necessarily want to get worried about ruderal species and start pulling weeds everywhere, pulling every non-native and ruderal species, potentially create more disturbance for yourself and more weeds for yourself in the future. So it's best to create the palette, let these native seeds start expressing themselves, and provide minimum disturbance, but the appropriate kind of disturbance to let natives evolve. So the caveat to that is that there are a few very invasive species that will not disappear under competition from natives. They like burning, like being flooded, like living with natives. And the ones that I have problems with are vasi grass, Johnson grass, and itchgrass, red boelia. Those are the worst species in my area in Acadiana. Cajun grass is a big issue basically everywhere else. East Louisiana, it's starting to become a bigger issue, and it's popping up places in West Louisiana. But these are the species that you want to give attention to after your prairie is started, and the species that you want to worry about expanding. You don't want to waste your time creating disturbance with other species that will eventually get outcompeted by natives. But these vasi, Johnson, and inchgrass and Cajun are some of the species that will not get outcompeted, so they need specific herbicide application or hand removal after to keep them from outcompeting your prairie. But otherwise, even if you don't see anything the first year, don't give up. I've had many restorations where I have struggled to find one thing after a year of planting that have been successful 2 to 3 years later. So like I was saying, there's a couple natives, but that's all weeds in between there. But it still looks wild. And like I was saying, you want to provide the right kind of site management. You want to not be too heavy-handed, but you want to provide the right kind of light disturbance at the appropriate times. Burning during the winter time is the main thing that we all know about, and it's the easiest thing that we can all accomplish without being worried about making mistakes or messing anything up. It's a foolproof. If you burn during the winter, you're not going to hurt anything, and it's going to help your prairie. During the season, mowing high, never mow your prairie less than 8 to 12 inches high during the growing season. The richer the soil you have, you want to mow towards 2 feet. If you have really poor soil, you can get down to 8 inches and not kill the plants. But if you mow to the ground during the growing season, you're going to give the advantage to weeds. You're not going to help you're not going to help the natives. So this mowing high, if you do have a lot of weedy species that might shade out your young prairie plants, mowing 1 to 2 feet high during the summertime will allow light to filter into those young prairie plants so they can continue to grow, not get outshaded, and then eventually come up in 2 to 3 years. Here's burning, example of a black line. Burning is not too difficult. It is something that you can begin to learn about on a small scale. Don't start big, start really small, and just kind of start experimenting with it and learning. This is a black line. To the left of the fire line is a mowed yard. So you can see this technique of how we manage fire. If y'all don't know about, you put in a black line to kind of where you start a fire is the coolest place and the smallest fire is the easiest to fight. So you start this fire here to create a zone without fuel. So when you light your giant prairie to the right and it sweeps this way, it will stop because there's this line where there's no fuel. And that's the concept of black lines. And generally you start on the downwind side.
Did you mow that first to get the tall stuff?
Yeah, I did bush hog that, so the flames wouldn't be quite as high because it is next. You can see a basketball goal behind that person up there. So there's a house right here. So we did bush hog. That's one thing you can do. Bush hog 1 to 2 feet, you know, and it'll knock down that fuel and kind of consolidate it. It'll still burn very well. If you have a lot of fuel, you can cut down the flame lengths, you know, 5 or 10 feet, which can help if you're next to somebody's house. Yeah. That's at Atelier de Nature. That's one of their sculptures. Me and Matt Boutte get to burn this site we've been burning the past couple of years. And so this is the day that me and Brian and Malcolm drove around to some of the remnants that I'd never been to and that Malcolm hadn't been to in a decade or so. Most of the remnants that they studied had been overgrown by chicken trees and vines and forests, but there were a few adjacent to the site, slightly smaller, not quite as diverse, but there were still remnants along Highway 90 that we know about. Still potential places to observe, research, and collect seed from to increase our genetics. A lot of this stuff, you know, I do with Louisiana Native Seed, trying to use local ecotypes. There's not a lot of source out there. We suffer from genetic bottlenecking. You grow the seeds out, they don't thrive. You can't produce them faster than they die. So that really turned a page in my book about opening an opportunity, what could be done here in South Louisiana. And that kind of started my journey of seed collecting and finding places, natural places, exploring, talking to people, finding where can we increase this resource. This is a pine savanna in central Louisiana. I'm collecting on thousands of acres now in Louisiana. I have pine savanna seed available if y'all need any for next year. We are expanding to try to accomplish every habitat, herbaceous habitat in Louisiana. Here's a little blue stem, piles and piles of it. So there's seed out there, just not quite as much as these Midwestern seed companies that produce thousands and millions of pounds of seed. And when you get to that scale, the seed becomes it becomes different than what it was. It becomes a farm plant. It's so many generations divided from their natural ecosystem. That's one of the things about using non-local seeds. I agree with Dr. Creech about not being pure native. You know, I've seen a lot of our native gardeners here go from, you know, being staunch only natives to kind of developing their own style with like 80-90% natives, and then they'll use, you know, a few other interesting plants, and they have their own style. So it's not horrible to use other plants, but when you're planting herbaceous plants on a large scale and you're bringing in millions of seeds and planting acres, then our local genetics can suffer from outbreeding depression, where these farm-raised genetics then can breed with our local genetics and potentially make them less successful. This is at the Cade farm at their seed cleaner, cleaning Baptisia alba seed. It's another resource that I use. They have a couple seed cleaners there that they got grants to grow wildflower seed for the highways. This is just a picture of what the seed mixes look like. They're semi-clean, diverse seed mixes. So, you know, I don't have large machines to clean the awns off of every seed, but we do clean the seeds to a usable state to where they can flow easily. They can't be used in a commercial planter to plant corn or soybeans or the grass seed you buy at Home Depot, but it makes them spreadable by other ways. And one of the main ways we spread seed is by leaf blowing. a lot of these seeds are designed to be windblown, but even the ones that are not, it's a diverse mixture. So when you're spreading that seed, seed planters have a tendency to separate based on species because they're all different weights and sizes, and blowing is a way you can keep it randomized and get a randomized coverage. So if you're not using a no-till drill or something, there are different effective ways. You can crisscross the field in 2 different directions is the most common way. Use half your seed, go one direction, use half your seed, go the other direction. And that's the informal way to ensure even coverage. And this is what it looks like blowing the seed out on one of our restoration sites. The seed, the soil is prepped, tilled, and we're using a leaf blower to broadcast it out the back of the trailer. And this is that same site a few months later. This is not native wildflowers, but this is kind of a trick we use to plant native wildflowers. There are dozens of species of long-lived perennial native wildflowers underneath these cosmos coming up. So this is at a solar field, and it's meant to beautify the area next to a neighborhood between the solar farm and the field. But you try to sell a prairie that won't look good for 5-6 years to this situation. It's not happening. So you have to appease people. You know, you can't plant wild grasses everywhere. You got to do what you can to get them planted. So this is not exactly a pure native situation. We got the best we could. It provides great short-term habitat for tons of birds. We planted a bunch of native sunflowers and all kinds of other wildflowers in here that produce tons of seed. It killed me mowing this thing in the fall because the sparrows, every time I mow, they just come back to it until there was 20 feet left. They would not leave. It was just so filled with seeds. And it's all surrounded by solar fields and cane fields, so there's not a lot of habitat. So, you know, provides pollinator, nectar, and quick look, and it's a nice nurse crop, cover crop for all these longer-lived perennials that are growing out underneath.
Put native sunflowers in there, in my experience, they are so happy to take over an acre. I mean, they won't mess up all your other prairie stuff.
No, in this situation, by the time the sunflowers are not even coming up yet, they come up late summer. And even though I put a lot of them in there, they weren't thick enough. You know, especially the wild sunflowers are, they're not thick. They're like spread out. They have their flowers aren't that big, and they're more spread out, open. That's the infrastructure behind it. But just the way that we get native wildflowers, there's a pollinator planted around these infrastructure areas.
So how long do the cosmos, do they come back for next year at all?
It remains to be seen. This will be the second year this year, and I don't think so. Yeah, but there are a lot of, so this mix this spring, what it's looking like right now is Coreopsis lanceolata and Rudbeckia hirta right now. So that's typical of a second year prairie. These biennial or short-lived perennial species are going to start showing their face second and third year. So that's kind of plan. You kind of create this succession.
So what about native annuals? There's not enough of those to.
There are the mainly the available one, partridge pea, is so effective that it will continue to compete with the perennials into the future. Basically, I would only plant partridge pea in the large prairie planting. Oh, scarlet sage would work. Yeah, that's one. It doesn't do the best competing in this full grass prairie situation. It likes a little more shady where there's less competition. Here's another site, and signage is a hugely important thing because people don't know what this is. I didn't know what it was when I first saw it. So, you know, in this situation, we decided to not spend more money on trying to make the planting look better. Just spent a few dollars on a sign explaining it to people that it will eventually look better. And to kind of follow the story, you know, it's not this stagnant thing that statue, evergreen bush that you plant. Changes through the season. This is in Lafayette. I forget the name. Silo Creek. Yeah, it's right by that Top Golf in Lafayette. Yes.
And they put in prairie bump between the main units?
Yeah, so this is like in a, right to the left is their pool house. Behind the sign is their pool.
Yeah.
That's kind of like their communal area in between, so you can't see it from the road. There's another 6-acre site that I did this fall. Soil prep, like you can see, but put in a few thousand plugs. Plugs, if you have the opportunity, grow out some plugs or get some plugs, you can really kickstart things. You can imagine, like everywhere you plant a plug, you come back the next year, the third year, you planted one rattlesnake master, you come back 3 years later, there'll be 50 growing there, started pups from spreading. So it's one way to fight the really bad invasives we have here, because when you try to start a prairie, you'll lose a lot to competition from weeds. This is a swale garden in New Orleans, Bayou St. John, planted with prairie plants. Another one of the benefits of prairie plants is their ability to grow in flooding and drought situations. So this situation, the prairie plants flood up to 2.5, 3 feet under extreme situations, but then it's got drainage, so it drains fairly quickly. So it's not understanding water for more than 12 to 14 hours, so they can easily survive. And then at the dry times of the year, when we don't have any rain, this infrastructure is still there and still alive to accept the storms when they do show up. This is Bayou St. John. It's a small water, Dana Brown and Associates and the city. Yeah, it's the city owns it. It's in the Greenway. And this is this is a Cajun Prairie Boucherie that we did a few years ago, talking about prairie. Met a lot of people, introduced a lot of people to prairie, and this is the prairie that we planted at that Cajun Prairie Boucherie. It's at my house in Grand Coteau at the nursery and seed farm. And this is all the volunteers and a bunch of kids. I think we planted like 700 or 800 containers, and all these kids got it planted really quick, maybe like an hour, really quick. So, you know, it really does make a difference to make it a community affair. You know, even not every one of these restorations is going to be permanent, or it's going to be effective, or it's going to provide habitat restoration services. Sometimes they just provide community and give us the opportunity to continue to learn and continue to do these projects. But this project ended up being a very successful prairie. So this is after the first year, burned it. Like I was saying, there's not really much to speak of. I don't even have any pictures of the first year because there's a lot of just weedy species, rabbit's foot grass, bahia grass, all these other things that you normally see in a field that you don't mow. Basically what it is, because these perennial species live 10 to 50 to 100 years, take several years to get started. So this is it, first year, first couple months of growth, or second year, first couple months of growth. This is the second year. The Monarda officiosa and Rudbeckia hirta has taken off. These biennials or short-lived perennials tend to really make a show in the 2 to 5 year period of your prairie. Your prairie is going to change its entire life, but you really get these, it's a really impressive show in the kind of like young to middle-aged prairie. You still have a lot of these shorter-lived perennials and biennials blooming and flowering before you get a bunch of 3-foot wide eastern gamagrass clumps and big blue stem clumps that take over everything. More shots, rattlesnake master, and then of course you just instantly start seeing a diversity of insects and animals. These are some of the spring ephemerals in the prairie. Pink Tradescantia hirsutaflora. I think Dr. Malcolm dug that one from a remnant, brought it to the Eunice Cajun Prairie Restoration Site. Scutellaria integrifolia, these short spring herbaceous plants. Echinacea sanguinea, Rudbeckia alyssimifolia, all these local native wildflowers. We've been calling this sanguinea pallida, at least that's what I've been told. I haven't gotten too deep into it, but there's a lot of things that we kind of just looked at and took for granted because it's such a complicated ecosystem that it's hard to see everything at once and take everything at once. The longer you start looking at it, you say, hey, maybe these do look a little bit different than the ones over in Texas, the little ones in North Louisiana. And you can start fine tuning our understanding of exactly what species and varieties make our local areas what they are. Solidago dora and Agalanthus fasciculata. All of these common, fairly easy to grow wildflowers. More Rudbeckia texana and Hirta and Arnoglossum ovatum. These are some of the, so all these are like, we're trying to create these, we're trying to mimic these beautiful areas that we've experienced, that we've seen, these remnant areas that have been undisturbed, these natural areas that aren't recreations. We're trying to create these little vignettes or textures that kind of resemble those areas. We can't expect to recreate these remnants that have been in existence for thousands of years in our lifetime. Maybe we can dream that maybe some of our restorations will live on for generations and generations and still be there and eventually become something that beautiful. But it's taking note of these vignettes and trying to recreate them in these small ways that we can. And a lot of them is about the textures and the scale of the prairie. This is winter bentgrass and green milkweed. Winter bentgrass, very easy to grow from seed. Green milkweed, not so much, but you can transplant green milkweed or take cuttings or grow from seed. Takes years.
Where did you get the winter bentgrass seed? I love that one.
I typically order that a lot of times because I don't harvest it. So I'll get it from Roundstone Native Seed sometimes. So like this one's a spring ephemeral. You'd have to have a field of just that in a agriculture rows because by the time it sets seeds, there's all kinds of other stuff growing up in it. This is little bluestem, and you can see the texture texture of it in the clumping form. And these are the kind of things you see on larger scales and smaller scales within the prairie. And when you start to see those aesthetics, those are your goals and the things you're trying to mimic. Here's another project, the Baton Rouge Zoo. It's coming along slow, but it's looking good. You know, this is another one of those things that we were lucky enough to be able to be involved and plant this project, but there's so much that needs to be done for public outreach and education. They got this. Nobody knew what they were getting. The park didn't know. The people there didn't know. They didn't know. Nobody told them. They just showed up. They said, we need to cut this. So, you know, when you do a project, there's so much you need to do with outreach and education. It's a huge part of what we do. There's more shots of the zoo. This is at Monkas Park. They don't always look good, but you know, you can find shots, find an angle where you get some really fast-growing Monarda citrodora and Rudbeckia hirta come up. Oh, that's a duplicate. Like I was saying, herbaceous plants grow all over the place. They grow in the woods too. This is Chasmathium sessiliflorum. It's a great woodland grass. Grasses grow in the woods too, so plant you some Virginia creeper and Chasmathium sessiliflorum and palmetto. Have a great woodland understory. This is just showing some of the ways that we find some of the plants that I was talking about, how we bring them back. We find places to harvest seed. This is a digital elevation model south of Lake Charles. It might be difficult to see, but there's some like pock marks and spotted. So that's an elevation model of the Mima mounds. I don't know if you can y'all make that out? I don't know. Where is it at?
It's right here, man.
Oh. But like, especially along the margins in this area where it's like trending towards wetlands, that they didn't farm and plow these fields. So by using all our resources, this is how I go out and find more sources to get native seeds to propagate and to encourage people to protect their resources and to manage them appropriately. So You can see like on these islands, it's these polka dots of red, and within this yellow, the red are the high points of the Mima mounds. So the scale goes from red high to yellow to green to blue is water.
What's
So
the elevation difference there on your map? And what is the range of heights in that?
I don't have a scale on here, but it's
Approximately.
probably 20 to 30 feet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's probably 20 to, it might be 15 feet, but you do have that much elevation difference where you get to hear where it washes out.
How about just on the pebbles themselves? How high are those things?
So these are about, they vary from 4 to 10 feet in this area, and vary from 10 to 25 feet wide. And Mima mounds vary in size and shape across their distribution. In this area, I would say they're kind of small to mid-size. There's some areas up north of Lake Charles where they're much bigger.
What kind of mound? What you're saying?
Mima mounds, M-I-M-A. It's a geologic feature. There's a lot of argument about how they form, but it was likely some kind of differential erosion, whether there was these bushes. You can imagine bushes growing, and either it got really dry and wind blew in and wind collected around the bushes, or eroded from between the bushes, or water eroded in between the plants. So it created this differential spotted pattern. And these occur throughout the United States in a lot of different areas. So pimple mounds are Mima mounds, and they're one of the signs that an area wasn't plowed or disturbed. So you imagine if it was plowed, we'd have flattened it out. And then they still have this relief, so you get a lot more diversity in these situations where you get dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, more diversity, less disturbance, more chance of finding preserved prairies. And these are a couple of the species that, this is Lobelia puberula. This is the one that, it's out there, it's all around. But I say all around, I've seen it 2 or 3 on a restoration here, 2 or 3 on a remnant here. And never in huge numbers, and growing the seed. This is one of the ones that had to grow out seed for a couple generations. This one, it only took 2 generations, but went from, traveling all over South Louisiana, witnessing maybe 24 individuals at most, to now growing thousands literally in my nursery of this from seed. So it doesn't take long to go out and find these things and start propagating and growing them. This is a yellow form Baptisia alba that we're propagating. I'm not against cultivars, nativars at all. There's a way to get people interested in natives, and you can't plant a prairie with nativars, so I'm not worried about that. This is in the Baptisia bracteata mostly. This is generally what they would look like to us. I guess the ones down in Acadiana might have a little more sphaerocarpa, but generally a lot of ours are pretty yellow. We get some creamy ones. In North Louisiana, they're a lot whiter, creamier. But maybe one of the reasons why is this is on Highway 90. This is one of the remnants at Esterwood. And this is one of the described hybrid Baptisias. So you can see it has aspects of bracteata and sphaerocarpa. So it's one to come out sideways, but then the flower spikes curl up instead of down. So there's just an interesting form that we've been exploring. Has a lot potential for use in the garden, more compact, tighter foliage with better spikes, with better bloom spikes. And so this one, Matt Boutte was telling me he got some seed last year, and I've been growing this. This one grows really well from seed, contrary to what the literature says. I've had great success germinating Baptisia hybrid seed. And so learning about this, trying to find inspiration, or where to learn more about this, where to continue your search, is just hanging out with other people that are doing it. This is Mark Pastorek at one of his prairie restorations near Covington. He made this beautiful prairie restoration and then just invited everybody to come see it as a field trip to show people. So, if you do a prairie restoration, invite people to see it. This is us, Mark and Celeste and Malcolm and Larry Weiner at the Eunice Cajun Prairie Restoration Site. You know, like it's always good to learn from people that are doing this. Larry Weiner has been doing this for, he's got that New Directions in American Landscape where they plant a lot of herbaceous prairies up in the Northeast. So he's got a lot of experience and PowerPoints and videos out there. You can read about him. Hanging out with Lattimore at one of these pine savanna restorations that they're doing. Just listening to these people and their experience. Here's me and Steve Applebaum. Lucky got to meet him last year. He's one of the guys leading up the Carbon Cowboys research, doing some groundbreaking research on prairies and carbon that are gonna be coming out in the next few years that I think everybody's gonna be impressed with. I think we underestimated what our prairies can do and what can accomplish. And one of the main things I'll say about what they're doing is the grazing lands and native grasslands on grazing lands. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but I'll just go ahead and talk about it now. What they're doing with the Carbon Cowboys and showing people how to graze on native prairies has a huge potential to change cattle farming, change health in America, I believe, because we just underestimate like how quickly we've gotten away from all these nutrients. We all know about native plants and exactly what nutrients these plant needs, but we're not giving ourselves those nutrients anymore. These Bahia grass fields that we raise cattle on don't have all those nutrients that the old fields did, that our parents and grandparents ate meat off of. We don't have those same omega-3s and nutrients that they did. And maybe we should start looking at that as some of our issues.
You might want to point out the AMP,
Yeah.
documentary that was done. I mean, it's well worth the $10 to see that, and get it and see it.
So-
Documentary's great.
Yeah, if you go to
Roots so deep.
Roots So Deep is the Carbon Cowboys documentary. You can see on Carbon Cowboys website, Roots So Deep, and they have a whole series as well.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You can see the devil down there.
Yep, that's the quote.
That is the title.
Well worth the $10.
And these are the guys here doing that. Vernon, Justin Fuselier, and Larry Allen. Really, Larry's doing a lot of research on studying what native plants here in Louisiana that we can start creating a natural forage mix. We're starting to plant some sites this year to do a little research. And if y'all know any big cattle grazers, we're trying to get more people involved in doing planting natives on large scale areas. We think we figured out how to make it effective economically.
What acreage would you call large scale?
5 to 10 acres at minimum. Potentially, to do more than that, we need grants and everything. But I'd like to find somewhere with 100 acres to plant.
So how could we connect somebody like that to you? Because I just met someone about a month ago who I think is a cattle farmer. She may be in Mississippi, but it would be right across.
Yeah.
Anyway, how would I connect her with people like this?
I think, yeah, connecting her with me and then everybody else that's involved in this. The Carbon Cowboys, you could probably reach out to them. But it's going to have to be something that larger organizations are involved that we can get grants for, because the situation, we know how to change a commercial pasture to a native pasture. It's just asking a businessman to close their business, throw away everything they have for their business, reinvest all their livelihood to create a new business that won't make money for 2 years. It's not really something you can tell somebody to do. So there has to be some kind of help to make that transition.
Can I mention the grazing lands,
Louisiana Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative. Yeah, Patty. Yeah, that organization, definitely. So like I was saying, that adaptive multi-paddock grazing, it's the new technique of rotational grazing. So if you hear this, just understand it's the developed technique of a rotational grazing that they're calling it now. Adaptive multi-paddock grazing, AMP grazing. So that's, And so these concepts is, the interesting things is no fences, rotational electric fences, and our electric collars, which is a really cool thing, you know, starting to become a cool thing. Yeah, like a dog collar. The cows are wearing them. Buzz and tell them where to go, you know. And so it's interesting. They try to create the largest herds they can because it mimics the natural ecosystem of a giant herd of bison very quickly eating just the tips of the plant, dropping a lot of nutrients in soil, creating the right amount of disturbance, and then leaving the site. So it mimics these giant herds of bison, and that makes the prairies healthier, makes the farmers more productive, makes them more money.
Don't the cows get fatter on native grass?
They do, and they have obviously higher amounts of omega-3s and those healthy fatty acids. And so, like I was saying, we're plugging beneficial edible grasses, rhizomes and plugs on 4 to 8 foot centers, like people plant loblolly tree farms. You send somebody out there with just throwing them in the ground like they do thousands of trees a day, and we can make this happen. This is at Vernon and Justin Fuselier's farm. They have a beautiful prairie. It's an old photo. Can't really see how beautiful it is. It's a little blurry, but that's us back in 2018. These are some images of some of the fires. Like I was saying, don't have to be prairies. You can improve your woodlands. There's a pecan orchard. It's now a native seed farm and pecan orchard. Is that another shot at Atelier de la Nature? Cool sculpture. This Brandon Belanger took this photo. This is at the Mamou Seed Farm. Yeah, night burns are cool, like they were saying. But yeah, the humidity does help control the situation. They're a lot less violent and problematic when it's dark. That humidity really dampens them. And so these are some of the things, you know, maybe not in your lifetime, but if we restore large areas and large enough areas well enough that we can hope to have these much more conservative species come back. And that's not going to take one restoration or one generation. You know, these are things that we have to think about. Setting motion these large scale projects into the future. The areas that we conserve, we've lost almost everything. There's barely any untouched land left. And of course we need to save that, everything we have completely. And doing these restorations, I think you'll learn how inadequate we are compared to how those original areas established over thousands of years through nature, you know, and appreciate those larger areas. So it's not that you want to replace things. You definitely want to go through all the effort you can to save remnants and populations that we have, but it doesn't mean we can't do restoration and play with that. That's just, you know, I'm a farmer and a grower and a horticulturalist, so that's just this part of the, you know, native plants that I got into. I think it's equally as important to save and make sure that we don't destroy more areas. Anybody got any questions?